Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about for INFJs, how do we balance idealism with realism? Our dominant function is intuition. And for INFJs it's introverted intuition, which means that we are often focused on ideals. So the problem with introverted intuition is that it is something that can show us real possibilities, but it is still a function that is not based on reality directly. It is a function that is based on reality indirectly. So it takes information from reality and then it changes it into something else that could be reality, but it could also not. So in the end, what could end up happening is that if we don't manage to balance these two functions in the right way, we either end up losing sight of reality because we are very focused on our intuition, or we end up losing sight of our ideals because we stop trusting ourselves, we don't trust our intuition anymore, and we believe that any possibilities we see are not possible, and then we might as well just forget about our intuition. So how can you be an INFJ who reaches their goals, possibilities, who's focused on innovation, but at the same time does not lose sight of reality? One thing we need to do is realize when our intuition is telling us something that's useful and when our intuition is telling us something that's not useful. So I talked about this a bit, where in one video I said that we should not follow visions that are not realistic, in which I talked about accepting change. So that's one thing, accepting change of intuition, which can be really difficult to do for us because intuition is very decisive. It will tell us something like, oh, this is what I want to do, this is where I want to be, or this is the truth about something. The problem is, once we have this feeling, we can feel like confused if all of a sudden this feeling changes, because we can be stuck with a certain feeling for a long time. For example, I have to do this thing, and then all of a sudden we'll have a feeling like, oh no, I don't want to do this anymore, or I want to go in a totally different direction, or something like, for example, I thought this person was a certain way and now I feel like that's totally not true. And this happens because we get more information, where intuition is dependent on sensing for how it works. And the more information we have about something, the more we know with our intuition as well. And this means that our paths can constantly change. But because we are very focused on a certain direction, we can just sometimes not like it when it changes because we don't see it coming. We don't see, like extrovert intuitives, many possibilities that we would just change from one to another or whatever, but we don't see it. We just see one direction and then one direction and then we go into that direction and then our intuition is like, okay, nope, we're not gonna do that anymore. And then we're like, okay, but then why did I go in that direction in the first place? If I'm not supposed to do that anymore, I'm supposed to do something else, right? It can confuse us because there's always something that we are not seeing yet, because usually we only see the best paths for us. We don't see all the possibilities until our intuition decides that we need to move to a different one. So it can make us feel kind of annoyed and kind of be like, I thought this was my path and then it wasn't. It can also make us feel like we cannot trust ourselves, which is very dangerous because we can trust our intuition. So we shouldn't feel like we can't trust ourselves. We should feel like we are always on the right path because our intuition has led us there for a reason. So that's one thing I want to emphasize. Your intuition always leads you somewhere for a reason. Even if it ends up not being the right path for you, you have to understand that no one knows everything. We don't know everything. I know we kind of want to know everything. We wish that we could predict everything, but we can't. And sometimes We thought something was the truth and then it wasn't. But that doesn't mean that we weren't going in the right direction or we weren't following the right goals, because we still got something out of it. Because usually our intuition only tells us to follow a certain path or that something is the truth. It only tells us this when it has a lot of reasons, a lot of underlying reasons or patterns to come to that conclusion. There's always these underlying reasons. It will never tell you that for no reason. So whenever we want to go in a certain direction, it's always for a reason. And that usually means that, for example, if you try something out and you thought it was going to work and it didn't, then that's probably because it was something you had to try because it could have worked. But you never have all the information. That's basically impossible. So that means that it definitely could have worked, it just didn't. But that means that you were already, for example, maybe you had a few options of what's the best path for you. And you tried one of them and it didn't work out. But maybe now you know that. You have very useful information of why it didn't work out. And what's the next path that you should try now? And now you know that that's the path that's maybe right for you because you already tried this other one. And if you didn't have that information of what things you should be trying, then you would never have gotten to that second path. So in a sense, intuition is helping you to tell you, okay, these are the things you should try. That doesn't mean you always know what your end goal is. You just don't know. But intuition is helping you to get to your end goal in the end. And if you didn't have that, you may just be trying things randomly without help of intuition. And then it would take you a lot longer to get to where you're supposed to be. So it's still helping you. You always get something out of it, out of following your intuition. Either you try something that you were supposed to try, or you end up somewhere that's not your destination, but that's literally right next to where you're supposed to be. For example, you might kind of feel like, well, how could I be wrong about this? You know, how could I think that I was supposed to go this way and then I was wrong? When in reality, the place you're supposed to be was literally right next to it. But because it was something different, you felt like you were wrong. Where in reality, your intuition still led you in the right direction. Just not to the exact place, but still in the right direction, right? Or sometimes it's just not the right time. And I want to give an example where at some point in my life, I was kind of like, okay, I want to be an artist. So I was working on that. I was constantly drawing, and then at some point, I just really felt like I want to quit. You know, I just want to stop doing this. And I just want to stop drawing and I don't want to do this anymore. So then I got this feeling of like, how could I be wrong about this, right? How could I have this feeling that I really needed to do this and now I just don't want to do it anymore? Kind of feeling like this self-doubt of like, so I was wrong about this all along, right? But then what ended up happening was that I did stop. You know, I did follow my intuition and I was kind of like, okay, I'm done with this. And then I stopped for about a year or something. And then all of a sudden I felt like I needed to go back to it. But then I realized that it had become kind of like a chore, kind of like a thing that I forced myself to do and I didn't have fun with it anymore. So when I went back to it, I started just following my inspiration and just having fun with it. And in the end, I never really left it and I just kept going because I was just totally doing something that made me lose all my motivation. So I guess my intuition was just like, yeah, this is not working. But I didn't know why, I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I just knew that I had to stop. And I didn't know that I would come back to it in the end. And that is why it's best to always follow it, but only when you have this kind of strong gut feeling. So that's the second very important point that I want to talk about. I already talked about this, but I feel like I only mentioned this in one video. And I didn't I didn't emphasize it enough. So I just want to talk about this gut feeling thing, where I feel like whenever we have enough information about something, where it's enough information that we can actually use our intuition, that we can trust our intuition, whenever we do, we have a certain gut feeling about it. This gut feeling is kind of like we feel this strong sense of knowing, where we start becoming kind of stubborn about something. For example, if someone would tell you something like, you're not supposed to do that, or it's not gonna work out, and you have this very strong feeling like, no, I know it's gonna work out, I know this thing is possible, or I know that, for example, I can or I cannot trust this person, those kind of things. It can be anything, but sometimes we just have this very strong feeling of knowing that something's gonna go right or something's gonna go wrong, because we somehow can kind of see it. We can see it going right or see it going wrong. And I cannot necessarily tell you why. I mean, sometimes I can. Sometimes I also have reasons why. But it kind of depends. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And sometimes we don't know for sure, but we know that there's about a 90% chance that that's the truth. So if you remember any such moments, that's kind of the gut feeling that I'm talking about. And it can range from how strong it is. Sometimes it's very strong, sometimes it's less strong. But I just want to emphasize that whenever you have that gut feeling, it's safe to follow your intuition. But whenever you don't have any gut feeling about something at all, or it's very weak, then you have to teach yourself that this is the moment when you are not supposed to follow your intuition. Because we cannot always only use one function. We have to use our extroverted sensing. So that's what I want to emphasize. Because I used to kind of think how come that sometimes my intuition is right and sometimes it's wrong, totally wrong. How, I would predict something and it would totally be different and be I can't trust this. But then I think the problem is in such a case that I wasn't really following my gut feeling. I was just ignoring sensing. So in that case, sensing in this case, of course, extrovert sensing is a lot of things. And in this case, it's about just trying things. Just let go of having a direction. Just try things, And I guess we don't really like that. We don't really like randomly trying things. We always want to have a reason for whatever we do. We always want to have a goal. We always want to make the most optimal decisions. But we have to also learn that sometimes we really need more information and we don't know the optimal decision yet. So we first have to try things to get more information. And then at some point, our intuition will suddenly kind of be oh, I know what to do. I know the answer. But first you have to try things, just randomly. Or maybe something that you kind of feel like trying. Also, just realize that some goals are important and some are not. For example, if there's something you really feel I want to really do this in my life, then go for it. But sometimes there are decisions you need to make about little things in life where it doesn't really matter what you do, and you might still feel I need to make the most optimal decision. But in reality, for the smaller things that don't really matter, you don't. Because it doesn't matter what you do. In that case, when it's not about big life decisions, but it's about small decisions, it doesn't matter what you do. You can just try things. Do something random. It doesn't matter if it's the best idea. It doesn't matter if it was the most optimal decision. Because I sometimes feel we feel everything has to be perfect. I need to do something that perfectly fits. That's the best decision. But really, for the smaller things in life, it doesn't have to be. You can try something and then be I'm gonna do something else, and then try something else. You don't have to do the right thing right away. Even if you could have done something that was a better choice, that's life. And sometimes the thing is, you may think that there is an optimal choice, and there just isn't. Because you were choosing between two options that the one thing has a negative side, the other thing also has a negative side. It's just something different, but like in the end, there was no optimal decision. So there's not always a best decision even possible. But sometimes we can feel like we really don't want to accept any randomness, but we should learn to accept that. So yeah, remember, if you have no gut feeling, doesn't matter what you just do something, just try something and wait until all of a sudden you do have a sign from your intuition of what you should do next. So yeah, never believe that it's useless to follow your intuition when you do have a gut feeling, because it always leads you somewhere. And when you don't, just embrace extroverted sensing, try things, try new things and see what happens. And yeah, because I feel like when you force yourself to try to follow your intuition, feeling like, oh, I need to know what the optimal decision is, and then kind of deciding on, okay, this is the best decision, and then doing that even though you didn't have a gut feeling about it, or predicting something with your imagination without knowing for sure, and then assuming that it's reality. In that case, you are just avoiding using sensing. You are avoiding trying new things, because you kind of feel like this is what I'm gonna do and I'm not gonna accept anything else. Or you want to know what's going to happen without even putting yourself in that situation. It means you're avoiding the situation and you're trying to predict something that you should have just gone into the situation with an open mind, just seeing what happens instead of trying to predict it, because then you're gonna be wrong, right? If you're too afraid to actually gather more data, gather more information before you follow your intuition. So yeah, remember, no gut feeling, we need to gather more data. And yeah, of course, the problem of being an INFJ is also that we can be very influenced by extroverted feeling, our auxiliary function, which is a function that makes us very kind of sensitive to how other people feel about our decisions as well. So, for example, we may have a clear vision or idea of what we want from life, but then if someone tells us, or like if a lot of people tell us something like, that's a bad idea, you shouldn't do that, it's not realistic, or people just disagreeing with us, then we can start doubting ourselves, because for us it's very easy to imagine where this person is coming from as well, because we might kind of be focused on their perspective and kind of feel like, yeah, actually they have a point. Well, what if it goes wrong? What if they're right? And sometimes we really forget to just focus on our own perspective, our own reasons of why it's not going to go wrong. And extroverted feelers have this danger of taking other people's perspectives seriously and not our own perspective. And then we may decide not to follow our intuition because we feel like we must be wrong because of everyone is telling us that we're wrong, right? Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that just remember that that's something you gotta watch out for. That even if people are telling you that you're wrong, they're not you, they don't know your reasons. They may not even have the patience to listen to your reasons at all. And they may not even have strong intuition. They may not see what you're seeing. They may even be sensing dominant. And then of course they're not gonna see what you're seeing. So yeah, it can really make us doubt ourselves sometimes, because our introverted thinking, which is a function that's more associated with our own identity, is just a bit weaker, and it's also not driven by emotions, so that also means that it can feel a bit weaker, but we need to learn to be driven by our own emotions and not by other people's emotions. So yeah, I just wanted to add that a little bit, because that can be one of the reasons why we feel like sometimes we don't want to follow our intuition when people don't agree. But of course, that is just dangerous because it means that we're not going to use our strengths. So yeah, lastly, I want to talk about compromising. So compromising and accepting that you're not going to be able to reach your ideals fully, because it's the thing you want to reach. It's probably going to be an ideal. We can see things in a way that's very perfect and very maybe long term, a goal that's maybe far away, or something that's basically an ideal that cannot be reached and that you can only try to get closer to it, which means you have to compromise. And like I said in another video, you should not expect whatever you try to create in life to be perfect, because that's not going to happen. And that doesn't matter, because even if it doesn't match the idea you had in your head of how it should be, it only matters that it matches it, sort of, that it matches it good enough. It doesn't have to match it perfectly. You need to compromise. You need to get closer to your ideal, or closer to your goal, or closer to what you wanted, because our ideals are there to help us. You know, they are there to set very high standards for ourselves, which means that because we have very high standards for ourselves, we can also we can also, I don't know the right word, we can achieve a lot of things because of that, because we're never going to even reach our goal. We're always going to be like wanting things to be better, wanting things to be closer to perfect, right? But that is actually, it's a reason to keep going, but it's also a reason to accept that it's never actually going to be perfect, and that doesn't matter because you did something. If you are focusing on your intuition, and if you managed to get closer to your goal, or you managed to create something that was kind of similar to what you wanted, then you still achieved something that a lot of other people maybe would not even have tried. So that's how you are supposed to compromise, because this compromise is a lot better than this perfect idea you had, because it's real. That means that it's meaningful. And it's not meaningful when it's only in your head, because knowledge, and ideas, they are so valuable, but they are only valuable when you share them with the world. And it doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter if you only want to share it with one person, or if you want to share it through writing or something, or art, but you have to share it. You cannot keep it to yourself, because if you keep it to yourself, it loses its meaning. And I know that we INFJs, we care a lot about meaning. So you have to understand that even if you think that you can't get exactly to your goal, if you at least try and create something, anything, that means that it's shared with the world. So I know that, we like to gather a lot of knowledge and a lot of life lessons and that kind of stuff, but we have to use it in some way. We can also use it for ourselves, to just be a better person, or be a more successful person, or be a happier person. And when you're happier, you can also have more energy to help other people. So in the end, in that case, you're also sharing your knowledge with the world, because you used it for something. But you have to use it for something in the end. Or you can just gather knowledge for a long time, and then after a while you share it. But in the end, you have to share it to have a meaningful life. And that means we have to compromise and accept that reality can be kind of a mess. It can be kind of not be what you expected. It can be random. But that's just part of reality, and that doesn't mean that it's not worth chasing your goals. Yeah, and of course the second thing we can do besides just compromising, is actually developing our extroverted sensing, as long as you use sensing to work on intuition, basically. So remember, for you to use sensing, you don't have to become a sensor, okay? You don't. You don't have to be like, everything I do needs to be realistic and I can't be creative or whatever. And if you're more grounded in reality, you will also find better solutions of how to make things work and how to make your ideas work in reality. Okay, so yeah, I think that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.